one of the hardest things about being homeless is the shame that you feel about being homeless. When people turn their eyes away or look down on someone or even are rude to them, you're adding shame. You are adding to the problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Michael Masurkevitch. Well, thank you so much for coming out today. It's a pleasure to talk about your film, Jim's Room.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to meet you guys in person, and I'm always really happy to talk about anything I've done, but especially the projects that resonate the deepest and most personal, and Jim's Room is one of those for me, so I'm really grateful to get to talk about it.
Explain the film, Jim's Room.
Jim's Room, it's a slow burn psychological horror about a homeless man who is offered a job off the streets by someone who turns out to be a sadistic killer kidnapper. He's offered a job to paint the interior of a house, and being on the street looking for cash, he accepts, and eventually he has to try to break his way out of his incredibly devious host to escape. The reason that we're here in this particular location, the edge of the riverbank, the way that this movie happened, I had a friend named Jason, lived in the house beside the corrugated building over there. And he was just this nice, friendly guy who I live close by, so I'd be walking by and he'd be like, "Hey man," and then we'd sit and chat. I learned more and more about him, and he had this beautiful story. He grew up in Northern Ontario with parents that, were just, they were just pretty toxic. And as a teenager, he found himself in the rave scene as like an outlet for his emotional issues. But then through the rave scene, he found drugs, and then he was like just suffering from homelessness, off and on the drugs. A really sweet-hearted guy, but just like a combination of his own demons, his childhood demons, his relationship with his father, and his having been taught to, as many of us are, to repress emotions and numb them with, in his case, the drugs he found in the rave scene because he loves to dance, just led to this situation of in and out of drugs and homelessness. And he was trying very hard not to be homeless and to find employment and to clean up, but it was very challenging. So this rock wall is one of the greatest tragedies of the city of Waterloo. It used to be a bank kind of like this, but steeper, and the water was kind of undercutting it, and it was all forest and trees, and it was beautiful. One time I went down and I found Jason there, like coming out of the bank with dirt on his hands. I was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And he was like, "I'll let you in on this secret." And he showed me these tunnels in the banks. And he told me how at one point he was just really, really hard on himself of what he was going through and his feelings of shame of not being able to pull his life together and get a real job and make it work. And he walked from his house down to the river to find a tree branch and hang himself and kill himself. As he was setting up to do this, literally as he was setting up to end his life, he just had this sudden impulse to just dig in the riverbank. So he just started using his hands and sticks and rocks and just started digging. And then he found this old glass bottle, and he washed in the river, and he looked at it, and it was like dated from 100 years ago. This saved his life and became his obsession and his reason for being alive. And he would just dig in the riverbanks, find historical artifacts from the city of Kitchener, and then go to the library to research Kitchener history. And he developed this insane knowledge of the history of literally this 200-meter stretch of Laurel Creek from when the city of Waterloo was initially being built. And he had cupboards in his tiny, shitty excuse for an apartment. All the walls were just cupboards of this artifact. And he would take me in and then spend an hour telling me about the different artifacts. It was his reason for living, and he wanted to get these pieces into a museum. And then the tunnels he was digging started to crumble. He had a network of tunnels, and the parking lots of some of the businesses up and down were crumbling. The businesses were very upset about this. Instead of talking to Jason, they talked to the city, and they were like, "Some crazy guy is tunneling under the parking lot, and we need to fix this." So the city
Built all the rocks.
cut all the trees, stripped the vegetation, destroyed every ounce of life, covered up the history of the city, and built a wall of rocks so that the business, their property, was no longer being impacted. Jason went missing shortly afterwards. I found out a year later from talking to one of the other people that he had taken his own life because that was his reason for living, and he was like, "Oh, my reason for living's gone, so off we go." So I had some grief from this that was unprocessed. Jason disappeared, and it took me a year to find out that he had killed himself. How often do homeless people go missing? What if a homeless person actually was offered a job to paint a house by what turned out to be a sadistic killer? The piece sort of flowed out as a tribute to my friend Jason.
I appreciate you being so vulnerable and open about this project and not kind of shying away from that. So
Thank you for letting me talk about it.
tell me a little bit about the challenges that you had when creating the film.
It was a roller coaster. I had never had a shock collar on. So the first few takes of the scene, Zach was like, "You're not quite acting shocked." And I was like, "We'll do one where the shock collar is on." I realized later my feet were chained with metal.
The shock collar was real.
The first take of the first scene where I get shocked, it was on, and it's actual electricity. I needed to know what it felt like. It sucked. But for the rest of the film,
You knew what it was like.
my performance of
Oh my
being shocked
God.
by the shock collar was much better.
That's
Yeah.
a difficult challenge right there. Oh my God, have I ever heard one.
Do you mind? We're doing an interview.
Get some of that for the B-roll.
I think what he's saying is that he also doesn't like the rock wall.
He's swearing a lot though.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Sorry. Before we were rudely interrupted.
The locals, yeah.
So you got hurt. That sounds like fun. How about highlights for you? Any fun moments, funny moments, something that stuck out to you while you were creating this movie?
There was this one day that it was just, we have to film these next upcoming scenes. We need to stay on schedule. It's gonna be a long night. Zach ordered some Monster with taurine in it. So we had all this Monster energy drink. They were like, "Michael, have a Monster energy drink." I had never had an energy drink. So I took half of it just like while we were still getting set up. And I was just like bouncing off the walls. I made up something called the taurine dance, which was basically just like wild dancing while saying the word taurine a lot. Taurine, taurine, taurine.
Why was this not in the film, man?
Taurine, taurine. It was just this like, it's the 9th hour. It's gonna be a crazy long night. We have some really deep emotional scenes to hit. And Michael is high as Christ on energy drink right now, just like dancing in the living room. Zach, Savon, and Lily are like setting up the cameras, being like, where was that light again? Can you move? And I'm just like, taurine, 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 taurine. And then I found out that taurine actually comes from bull testicles or something like that.
Fantastic.
Michael, you're high on bull semen, and I was like, taurine, taurine, taurine.
People that watch the film Jim's Room and they watch it and they go, "Wow, I really enjoyed that movie. I want to make a movie like Jim's Room." Where would you tell these young artists to start?
Find someone in your life or go out and talk to people at the fringe of society. Find the core of a real human story. And then from that core, from the honoring of the human story, be like, "Oh, okay, now how can I take this heartbeat and add the flesh and bones of story structure or genre to turn it into an entertainment package?" Maybe it's like, "Oh, my grandma went through this shit." Imagine that, but with zombies. Now you're using the horror genre to create an entertainment piece built around this real life human core and some Monster energy drinks. So,
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you want the world to take away from this story?
Love in the darkest places. In a way, I think all stories are love stories, and this is definitely holds true to that. And this holds true to Jason. Jason was this crazy, drug-addicted, homeless man digging in the banks of the creek who would give you the shirt off his back if he had a shirt. He was a lovely, passionate, caring, charismatic guy. Probably the biggest takeaway that I hope people will come at is that one of the hardest things about being homeless is the shame that you feel about being homeless. When people turn their eyes away or look down on someone or even are rude to them, which happens way more than it should, you're adding shame that is keeping them hooked to the drugs that numb the shame. When you treat people in a place of shame with shame, you are adding to the problem. Jim's Room is that even the darkest places with the most horrible people have love and have some form of honor and caring, even when they're in really dark places. People suffering from homelessness, not as their homelessness, but as the beautiful human who, like Jason, underwent these situations that just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until they were at the bottom and couldn't get up.
That's beautiful, man. It all comes back to him. I appreciate you so much for coming out here and being so honest. Tell the audience where they can watch Jim's Room and more of your work.
Jim's Room is on Found TV. It's also on YouTube. Easiest way to see more of my work is Instagram, actor.Michael.
Follow him. He's an incredible actor.
Deeply personal to me, and I really, really appreciate you guys helping me tell.
Oh my God.
This was